David Victorson, and I am very excited to be here today to get to help moderate a conversation around the impact of cancer on our emotional well-being, and also on how we might also be able to find moments of resilience in the face of cancer. I am a licensed clinical psychologist by training and am a professor at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, where I conduct mostly cancer-related research as it has to do with emotional well-being and resilience and quality of life. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called True North Treks, which supports young adults and caregivers affected by cancer to help them find direction through connection. And we take groups on free backpacking and canoeing treks in beautiful wilderness destinations where they can connect with nature, where they can connect with others who've hiked a similar path, and where they can connect with themselves through meditation and yoga. So because of all of that background, this particular topic is very meaningful and of great interest to me. And so anybody who's joining and who joined because they saw the title knows that cancer is not exclusively a physical issue, or it doesn't only affect us physically, that it also it affects us emotionally and socially as well. And to try and learn how to navigate that and bounce forward with those moments can mean everything to somebody who is experiencing the distress that can be related to cancer. So in today's session, we have three incredible speakers, who each of whom is going to briefly introduce themselves in a second. One of the speakers is Ms. Patricia Goldsmith from Cancer Care. She's the CEO. Another speaker is Ms. Kelly Hendershot, and she's also a senior director at the cancer support community. And finally, the third speaker is Ms. Amanda Kesler, and she's a cancer survivor. And I know that she's much more than that, but that's what it says on my piece of paper here to describe Amanda. So without further ado, I'd like to just give the mic now to the three speakers so that they can give brief introductions, and then after that, we'll go into our conversation. Patricia, why don't we start with you first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Trish Goldsmith, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Cancer Care, which is a 76-year-old organization based in New York City that provides help, hope, financial support, and education to anyone who has been impacted by a diagnosis of cancer. And we are an organization that typically serves about 200,000 individuals directly across the US each year. A little bit about myself that I think is relevant for our discussion today. I have spent virtually all of my professional career, and if I told you how many years that was, I'd really be dating myself. You'd say, oh my God, she's as old as dust. But I've spent virtually all of my professional career in the oncology environment, primarily in academic medicine, working with organizations that have treated many, many different individuals across the spectrum of cancer. And I have been and had the pleasure of leading Cancer Care for 6.5 years. I also am a cancer survivor, which is really very relevant, I think, to our discussions today, not only about what my organization does, but I'll tell you a little bit about my diagnosis and how it impacted me in surprisingly many very positive ways. So 10 days before I was to assume the CEO role at Cancer Care, out of the blue, I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And having spent so much of my life in academic medical centers and organizations, and having so many people call me through the years and say, my husband's just been diagnosed, or I've been diagnosed. What do I do? Where do I go? My mind would just always kick into, okay, here's who you're going to see. We've got to get the path report. You have to get a second opinion, etc. But when you hear those words yourself, it really does bring a whole new meaning. And it wasn't that I was afraid to die at all. It was really just going through the emotion of it. How am I going to start this new job? What am I going to tell the staff? What am I going to tell the board? What I will say to you, and then I'll stop, is that I am by nature a very positive person. And in many different ways, my cancer diagnosis, and now gratefully, I am almost 6 years out from treatment. And so far, so good. My cancer diagnosis really, really was a blessing in so many different ways, both in terms of how I looked at life, number one, how I, as a CEO, was prepared to help support individuals that were so much less fortunate than I am. And it also taught me that even if you have the best of connections, the best support system, the best insurance, it is still so extraordinarily difficult. And I think for all of us that have been diagnosed with cancer, even treated successfully, it never goes away. It's always in some way a part of you. And what I have chosen to do in my life is look at that experience for making me a stronger CEO, a better human being, and hopefully more passionate to help people that are so much less fortunate than I am. So I'll stop there and turn it over to the rest of my panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. That's wonderful, and thank you so much. Kelly, why don't we go ahead and, since you're next to Tricia on my screen, we'll go with you next.
Thank you, David. I'm Kelly Hendershot. I am the Senior Director Program for the Cancer Support Community, and so my office is located in Washington, D.C., although I'm currently at home, as you can tell from the background. The Cancer Support Community, we are a global network of support. We're in 175 locations and have provide $50 million in free support and navigation services to anyone impacted by cancer. Excuse me, of course, I get something stuck in my throat as I'm speaking. But our mission is to make sure that people impacted by cancer are empowered by knowledge, strengthened by action, and sustained by community. I am actually new to my role. I've been in this position since August, but I came from a cancer support community affiliate in Davenport, Iowa. It was a Gilda's Club location, and I was program director there. But getting a little bit personal, I come from the caregiver perspective as well. My husband was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in 2007, just 3 months after we got married. And he survived 19 months after that, but we kind of had to learn to shift our gears and reach out for support for our own mental health and well-being. And we did so by reaching out to the Gilda's Club in Davenport, Iowa. So I know a little bit firsthand from the caregiver perspective on how important it is to focus on your own mental health, because it's something you just want to toss aside and focus on your loved one in their time of need, right? But it's something that we all need to focus on, make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can more adequately support our loved ones. And then in situations like mine, so that we can continue on and honor their memory once they have died. And so lots of different perspectives. Professionally, I did become a social worker after my husband's death, and I have facilitated support groups for newly diagnosed, for caregivers, and even from bereaved. So that's just a little bit about myself. I'll save more time for Amanda.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Amanda, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, depending where everybody is. Thanks to Grit Health and especially Lauren for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to hang out with you guys today. I feel very honored to be on the panel with you guys. So my name is Amanda Kesler. I am 8 years out from a Hodgkin's diagnosis, and I am only a few months out from a mental health breakdown. So I seldomly joke, make jokes, laugh, smile through this whenever I can. And I think it's really important to point that out ahead of time, just to avoid offending anybody. It's just, I can smile, laugh, or joke when my mind allows me to, and that's the way I kind of push through. Basically, I say my cancer didn't kill me, but my mental health tried to. Back in April, when life slowed down for a lot of us, life slowed down for me, and the unknowns of COVID were very, very similar to the unknowns of my cancer diagnosis. And I just felt completely out of control. Like, I wanted a test every day. I wanted to make sure, like, it's kind of like cancer wherever you like poke or prod that you feel. For me, it's like in my neck. That's where a lot of my masses were. And now anytime I cough, I sneeze, I mean, now the symptoms are endless. So any kind of symptom. But every time I would have a poke or prod, I'm like, I have that, oh crap moment that cancer's back, versus now every time I cough or do one of these symptoms, I'm like, I have COVID. I'm not going to disclose how many tests I've gotten. Probably too many. All very valid, for all very valid reasons though. So back in April 10th to be exact, I was voluntarily admitted to an inpatient facility here in Colorado. I'm actually from Maryland, so shout out to East Coast. I loved hearing that you live in DC now. But I now in Colorado, I feel very fortunate to live in a state that takes mental health awareness very serious. So like I said, I was admitted for inpatient for 4 days, where I was met with a team of professionals that met me with lots of skills, lots of medications, which is okay. And then from there, I have truly immersed myself in any type of group therapy, one-on-one talk therapy. Still can't get into yoga or any mindfulness like that. But I have participated in, like I said, inpatient and then intensive outpatient programs since April. One of them I just finished, I graduated, they call it. But I'm a work in progress. So like I said, I was very honored that I got to connect with Lauren, and I get to connect with you guys to kind of just chat about the significance that cancer plays on our mental and emotional health, because a lot of physicians don't treat those aspects of a diagnosis. And I am definitely, I'm in the midst of it. I'm 8 years out. Never have I dealt with mental health the way that I have, or a mental illness, I would say, the way that I have now. I have sat here and questioned, how did I make it this far? And now I'm going to have a breakdown. Like, now this is what it's going to take to break me down. But I mean, it just goes to show that just like cancer, mental health does not discriminate. It doesn't care who you are, what status you hold, what age you are. If you're a mom, a sister, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, or I just think that there are so many unknowns of mental health, just like cancer, and it's all a little too familiar for me still. So yeah, I'm very determined. I'm very passionate. I turned my cancer into a career, which I felt very honored to do that back in Baltimore. I don't know if I'm going to turn this mental health struggle into a career, maybe a passion project, but I am just determined to turn this for good. So anyway, anything that looks like for me right now, chatting with people who get it, and chatting people who are trying to get it and understand, I'm all about those opportunities right now.
Wow, thank you, Amanda. That was beautiful and so real and genuine. And as was yours, Kelly and Trisha. Each of you has your own unique stories that are only going to be yours. And then there are other parts that I'm sure everyone on this call will be able to relate to. And so realizing that we all walk our own path, and what might work for us, what might be our main thing that we do or how we cope might not work so well for others. So I guess I would like to, and each of you is already doing this, so I don't need to really set this, but we can just always remember that when we're speaking directly about our own personal experiences, about what it's like for us, or what it has been like for us. And then through sharing some of that in this conversation today, others might be able to be flies on the wall and pick up some nuggets of wisdom and hope. And also, one more thing I guess I'll say is today's conversation is pretty broad. It could go in lots of different places. Don't feel constrained by my first question. Feel free to pivot and take it in a different direction if you want to. We only have 40 minutes left, so we should get to it. The last piece was, we can talk about the part of the title is resilience, and part of the title is emotional well-being. And so I expect that we'll talk about some of the good, bad, and ugly. And please feel free to share as much as you want, and we totally get it if you want to, time out as well. So without further ado, the first question I guess I'm just going to throw out to the whole panel is, what do you want people to walk away from today, from this session, in terms of cancer and mental health? What are some things that you think are really important, that have been important for you as it relates to your relationship with your own mental health as somebody who's been affected by cancer? And then I believe you can undo your own mics, so I'm just going to let you go ahead and undo that.
So this is Trish. I'll start. And I suppose to some degree it's personal, but it's also related to my profession and my career and my organization. And that is that every day we see individuals, even those that have fabulous clinical teams and a team of nurses, physicians, and others that are helping to support them or prescribing their treatment, but yet the other surrounding needs, whether they're practical or emotional or psychosocial, are so often overlooked. And quite frankly, in our healthcare society, from my perspective, minimized, whether that's from the perspective of insurance coverage or trying to have access to the best support systems. And so, I think sometimes cancer patients and their loved ones, caregivers, as an example, feel, I've just got to tough it out. I've just got to be tough. I can't complain about this. Gee, I've got to get through this treatment. And there's so much more to it than that. And I wish that we as an organization and as a society could put the same emphasis and value on those needs and the importance of those needs as we do the chemotherapy, the immunotherapy, the radiation therapy. And that's something that I think all of us have to work to change. And then the second thing that I'd like to share with this audience, because I want to talk about my hero for a moment. And I want to talk about somebody that is an extraordinary inspiration to me, and I hope will be to you when you hear her story. So, well over 20 years ago, there was an individual that came to Cancer Care as a client, and she had been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic lung cancer. And she became a client at Cancer Care, ultimately became a volunteer, and then became an employee of Cancer Care. She is, as far as we know, the world's longest living stage 4 metastatic lung cancer patient at 24 years out. And up until COVID, she, at 82 years of age, she came to work every day. She came to work to help with our wig clinic, to answer inquiries from clients. And here is an individual that had more chemotherapy, radiation therapy, immunotherapy than you can ever imagine. But it was an individual that every day came in with her walker, dressed so brightly, and always gave back and brought a smile to people's faces. And, you know, she is my hero, my inspiration, and an inspiration for so many of our clients. And I think in many different ways, Amanda, Kelly, Kelly, I lost my only sibling to a brain tumor when she was 19 years of age. It changes you forever. But I think that in our own ways, we have to look to be heroes to others and help them by telling our stories, by being honest about our needs, about our vulnerabilities. And so I applaud you, Amanda, and you, Kelly, for doing that. And wherever I can, I have to share the story and inspiration of Cindy Bass, who's impacted so many people's lives. And I'll stop there.
That's awesome. What an incredible testament. David, I think to answer your question of what do I want these guys to walk away with? I'm trying to think back to like my first days of things. And I think it is so incredibly important to not compare your beginning to somebody else's middle. And I think that that can be talked about, that can be said for cancer, mental health, for so many different things. And I have absolutely done that before. Not going to even pretend that I'm a pro at this stuff. But what I want them to walk away with is understanding that it's not an all or nothing. It's not a black or white term in regards to getting help for your mental emotional health or care. You can see a therapist once a week. You can see a therapist 5 days a week. You can be impatient. You can there's such a spectrum of resources and help out there. And I do understand the discouragement that comes with where the hell do I start? And I think that's a question that we might be talking about. But I guess, and I don't want to give advice, but it's don't compare, especially right now, today, like through this session, through hearing my story. I mean, I think there's a lot of value in comparing stories and understanding like, oh, she gets it. She's walked in my shoes, and there's so much value that empathy can bring to conversation. But don't compare, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I think everybody's cancer survivors on here, I think, for the most part. And if there's one thing that I overheard repeatedly from my oncologist when I asked him, like, when's my hair going to fall out? When's this going to happen? Well, everybody's different. And I was like, you know exactly when this stuff is going to happen. Like, you know that there's a timeline that, but everybody's journey is different. And it's depression, PTSD, anxiety, panic. I have been blessed with them all. My medical charts look phenomenal. My medication list they always give me the second sheet now so I can write down my medications. And my first time I did it, I was embarrassed. The second time I did it with pride, because I'm taking those medications and I'm seeking help because I know that I need it. So yeah, I guess that's a few things that I would like these guys to take away from today.
You two are a tough act to follow. I think my takeaway would be, we need to really kind of end this cycle that mental health there's a stigma behind it. I know for myself personally, being 27 years old and reaching out to a cancer support community, that was hard. That was very scary. I grew up in a family where our family deals with our issues. We don't go to outside people, maybe our very closest friends, but that's about it. You don't talk about what's going on with your life. So it was very tough. I think it was Patricia who used the word vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable and scary point of time. But with mental health, there's no one direct shot. There's no one path to addressing your own mental health needs. For some people, it will be medications. For some people, it's more of those meditation or yoga, changing some of your lifestyle factors to address your mental health needs. So again, not comparing what course of action you take to other people. I'm just repeating what Patricia and Amanda have shared. But give yourself grace too, because you would more than likely tell a friend, tell a family member to make sure that they're taking care of their mental health needs. So it's important that we turn the mirror on ourselves and do the same when we're in that place.
Each of you touched on the importance of, or the phenomenon of the stigma around mental health, the culture that treats physical injury and disease as different than mental and emotional. And you're all advocating that this culture has to change in some way. If I could just put it back to you and say, how do you actively try to help it change in your own daily lives? What kinds of things do you do through your own actions or attitudes that are the butterfly wings that contribute to a larger change?
I'll start on this one and I'll try to be very quick. I think this is the reason why Lauren reached out to me. I have the great honor of being her Facebook friend. And I made the personal commitment and promise to myself that, unlike my cancer journey, I told it in hindsight. I was determined to use it for good, but I had to get through it first to help somebody else. That's how I felt. Where here, I'm trying to be vulnerable and I'm trying to stand in the fire to help somebody else while I'm in the thick of it. So I said, I am actively in care right now. I am actively medicated. So I shouldn't even be crying right now. Apparently I don't feel emotions like normal people do. But I have began to informally vlog my journey. I am a very proud millennial. I believe in the power of social media and just its ability to connect communities that wouldn't typically be able to connect physically in person or without having that social media online aspect. So I have allowed myself to be vulnerable, to put my feelings out there, to truly look in the camera and say, today is a day that I have no idea how I'm going to make it through. And I'm dreading waking up tomorrow because I know it's going to be another battle in itself. At first, I was very, very apprehensive because I didn't want to trigger or prompt anybody else with their emotions or their feelings. I didn't want to offend any of my family or friends with being so vulnerable and raw. And because if this DB, dialectical behavioral therapy, has taught me anything, don't use the word but. I think that's a big advice. The one advice that I can give too. Replace the word and instead of using but. It's kind of where two conflicting thoughts can exist in the same sentence with using the word and instead of but. Very quick tutorial on it. I can tell my boyfriend, I love you, but you really piss me off when you do X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry for cursing. Vice versa, instead of using but, you can say, I love you and it makes me mad when you do X, Y, and Z. So it just sounds a little better. So how am I trying to help? How am I trying to change that stigma? I'm trying to talk about it. And I want to continue to talk about it because if that encourages somebody else to go maybe get help, get therapy, get treatment, or even if it encourages them to start talking about their own story, then I'm good for the day. Like I said, I'm determined to turn this for good. I constantly pray on the clarity of how I'm going to do that. like I said, through a career change or passion project, or but I am determined to continue to keep talking about it because I know I'm not alone. Like that is one thing that I have learned after sitting in a room full of people during COVID times with a mask on, of course, the faces of mental health and mental illness and those struggles and of suicide and self-harm attempts, and like it's people of success, of fortune, of power, of wealth, of or the opposite. And it's just like, how did you get here? And then I'm sitting there looking at myself in the mirror like, well, how the hell did I get here? So yeah, I think the more we talk about it, it's gonna, I'm hopeful it's gonna become a little less strange to talk about in coffee shops, at a bar, in the pool, wherever. So just trying to keep talking about it.
This is Trish. I think that the best way that I can bring a voice or a face to this is by ensuring that my organization is successful and can be there to help as many people as possible. For those of you that don't know, we employ 40 master's prepared oncology social workers, and they are the first point of contact for the vast majority of individuals that are reaching out to us. And having a career all of my life before cancer care in academic medicine, I never had such a deep appreciation of the importance of psychosocial support for cancer patients, caregivers, the bereaved, anyone who's been impacted by a diagnosis of cancer, and how that can make all the difference. There are times when individuals will call us and say, I want to give up. I just want to abandon my treatment. Nobody understands me. There will be times when someone will call up and say, the physician didn't give me a choice. They just told me this is what you need to do. Or times when individuals are afraid to talk about their fears of death, their desires with respect to quality of life. These are all as important as the treatment, and yet are so undersourced, so overlooked, and undervalued. And I think that for me, the way that I can best bring a voice to that is to make sure that those services are available to as many people as possible each and every day. And so that's really become a deep passion of mine.
I think for me, similar to Amanda, it's sharing my story, but also sharing resources. Because like I said earlier, everybody will find different routes to their own mental health needs. So if somebody approaches me who is not newly diagnosed with cancer or who is a new caregiver, I'll try to find out where they're located and find out what resources they have in their area. One of the great things about cancer support community is we are in 175 different locations. So I can pull up a map and find out if we're in your state or your community. And if that's not the case, I'd share different articles. Cancer care is one of my go-to resources. And then it's inviting people to try things that they hadn't thought of. And this was suggested to me when my husband was diagnosed, try yoga, try meditation. Well, I kind of laughed in people's faces because that's something I had never done. And I'm like, that's not going to help me. I'm a more of a contact athlete, endurance athlete. I can't do that kind of thing. Well, here I am 11 years later, and I'm certified to teach yoga for cancer. So people might not be open to suggestions at one time in their lives, but as long as they're open to new opportunities, it's something they might try down the road. It's something they might try down the road and decide that it's not for them, and that's fine too. But for me, it's a lot about just getting to know other people and finding out what might connect with them and try to hook them up with the correct resources.
Thank you all for sharing those things. I'd like to, if we could, pivot our conversation to some of the different hats that we wear or have worn with other people in our lives, the relationships we have. And Kelly, if we could stick with you for a second, because as you have worn two different hats that are unique here, that of caregiver and that of widower. And I don't know if that's the current way that it is even said, but that's just what came to my brain. And it's testament to the fact that does not get talked about. I would say that side as much. And so it's not as much part of our social dialogue and conversation. And I'd love to hear if you would feel comfortable just reflecting on some of those different hats that you've worn and how you have, again, navigated your own self-care and mental health through those different roles.
Sure. No, that's a great question. As a caregiver, it was difficult. We were both in our 20s trying to find communities that really understood what we were talking about. And it was actually through my husband's oncologist office that somebody who worked for the Gilda's Club in the Quad Cities walked in the door and had a conversation with him and said, hey, I think you and your wife might be interested in this place. When he told me about it, he's like, hey, this cute girl came in and visited me and told me about Gilda's Club. I'm like, wait, back up, cute girl, what? So I was actually a little reluctant to go for the first time. But that cute girl is now a very good friend of mine many years later. But I mentioned earlier, it was really hard to go through those doors for the first time. But my friends didn't understand what I was going through. I hadn't had much death or loss in my life at that point. So I didn't know where else to turn. So it was about allowing myself to be vulnerable and try a support group. Gilda's Club and Cancer Support Community, they offer a wide variety of supports, the support groups, educational opportunities, healthy lifestyle activities. For me, what I needed at that time was that support group. Granted, the participants were all a good 20 years, 30 years older than me at the time, but they understood what I was going through. A lot of them had spouses with the cancer diagnosis. My husband ate it up. He was in a separate support group room for people with the diagnosis, only male in the group at that time. He referred to the ladies in his group as his surrogate mothers and surrogate sisters. So we both got our needs met. I have no idea what he talked about in his group. He needed that outlet. I needed my outlet. He still has no clue what I talked about either. But it really taught me that I wasn't alone, because I think that's one of the struggles with mental health. We think we're going through it alone until we do start talking to other people. And that's the same concept with me being a widow. Very early on, people did shy away from talking to me. There's a lot of stigma about that W that I was now assigned with. In my own family, I would even hear my niece and nephews start to bring up Justin, and my sister would just kind of shush them. Be like, no, we need to talk about him. They need to know more about their uncle. He was an important part of their life, and he will continue to be. And that, just real quick, that nephew, for the longest time, he was struggling. He was 6 years old when this came up. He was visiting me in the Quad Cities for the first time with his family. I introduced him to the first guy that I dated after my husband that was worth introducing to family. And he was a little brat. My cute little nephew was a brat. I pulled him aside and said, this kid was actually struggling with his own mental health around grief. I pulled him aside and said, what is going on with you? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, don't you like Michael? He's like, no, he's fine. And I'm like, this is about Justin, isn't it? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you know what happened to Justin? He's like, I think he died. He thought he died. And that was 4 years prior. So nobody fully explained to him what happened, because it was a stigma to talk about death, just like it's a stigma to talk about mental health. And the kid had a complete turnaround. He and the boyfriend at the time were best friends the rest of the weekend. He just needed someone to open up and listen. And that's what many of us need when it comes to mental health as well. So David, I hope I answered your question.
Amanda or Tricia, feel free to add on to that original question about some of the different, I said different hats you have to wear. I was really trying to connect with, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we have to interact with different important people in our lives. Some are family, some are friends, some are colleagues. And mental health doesn't care. How does that, how do you kind of, if you do this, how do you put the wind into your sails instead of, or how do you deal with it when your sails are just going all over the place?
So this is Trish. I'm going to once again date myself a great deal. And I mentioned earlier that when I was 19, my only sibling, who was 22, died of a brain tumor. That was back in 1977, but before probably any of you were born. But I will tell you that I can remember that day like it happened an hour ago. I can remember everything I was wearing. I can remember the intensive care room. I also know that that day changed my life and my family's life. My parents, and this was, oh my Lord, you didn't cry, let alone talk about your mental health. It literally destroyed my parents' marriage. My father became a very angry alcoholic. My mother was left to pick up the pieces. My sister and I were very, very different people. My sister was perfect, straight A's, Miss Happy. And, there were times when I wondered, gee, did the wrong child die? Um, and I also struggled with what happened. And as the years went by, I wanted to understand more about her diagnosis, about her treatment, because I often wondered, did we make mistakes? We did. We actually did. We should have gotten another opinion. She shouldn't have had 3 massive neurosurgical procedures at the facility that she did. I don't know whether the outcome would have been different, but I can tell you one thing. That's why I'm in healthcare. And that's why every day I want people to get the help they need, physically or emotionally. Thank you.
Sure can get you guys display so much strength. It's incredible through your stories, and I'm like sitting here watching people's chats that are like just as blown away as I am by your guys' strength and by being on here and sharing such personal and vulnerable stories that you guys have truly conquered. It's just completely admirable. And David, I'm sitting here trying to think of how many hats. I've got a lot on my shelf in my room. But I have the unique opportunity to be completely in love with a man who is also a cancer survivor, who has also dealt with some very, very dark alleys and valleys of his own mental health. I hate that that is something that we have in common. And at the same time, I am incredibly blessed that I can look at him. I don't say a word and he gets it. And it's like, I feel so lucky to have a partner that is very supportive in what I'm doing, and has very similar values and morals lined up. With that said, when he has a scare with cancer, I have a scare with him. Like, it's just, when you go through a cancer diagnosis, it's not just that one person that is impacted by it, that's physically impacted by it, or even mentally, emotionally. Same thing with mental health. Like, this man has sat on the bathroom floor with me in complete tears, has had to turn off the stove because I'm in the middle of dinner and I just can't complete dinner because I'm just having a breakdown over, I don't know, salt or pepper. Like, it's like like I said, it's a very unique opportunity that I get to wear the hat of a caregiver and of the patient. There are times when I'm wearing both hats at the same time. Same with him. Like, and I say we're day by day in it over here. And that's really all you can do, because when you suddenly clump you're like, oh, I've had 3 bad days in a row. It's like, don't look at it like that. You're here, you're today, like, take on today with your full strength. And I just feel super lucky that I get to hold the hand of him. And if I can't go through it alone, he pulls my butt through it until we get through it together. I have also now taken on the role of not a caregiver, I don't want to call it a caregiver. I would say of a good friend. I think it's fair to respect their privacy, but to some very close, very, very close family members of mine who now have taken a hold of their mental health and who have started to seek out help, and I'm incredibly proud of them. And it's all because of what I went through and the awareness that I brought to my family. So I take a lot of pride in that, but also just looking at them and, again, complete admiration that they are taking this into their own hands. So I think too often we are both the patient and the caregiver sometimes. And sometimes we don't realize that we're like the patient or we're the one in that hot seat while we're in the caregiver role. And sometimes I think it's so okay just to stop and pause and say, like, I'm not okay and I need help too. It might be a different type of help than what your partner or parent or sibling or whatever that is might need. But yeah, I think too often than not, we are all wearing more than one hat.
Thanks, Amanda. I think it's safe to say that the relationship you have with this person in and of itself must be an epic experience. So we're going to transition now for the last 10 minutes. And, I've had a really conflicted relationship with the chat on my right here because I've got some functional ADD going on, and every time a new comment, I get a little excited about what could be said. And it's just such an outpouring of love and support. And so I've loved reading it, and it also gets in the way of looking at these awesome people talking and giving their, sharing their stories. So now it is your turn, audience. We're going to do our best. If any of you has any specific questions for any of the panelists or a question that anyone could take, please feel free now to start to put them in the chat section so that you can also get a chance to have them reflect on something that's important to you. All right, so first up from Nicole Owens, what is your best advice for taking care of kids or your family when you are dealing with your own health struggles? Great question. Anybody feel free to take that?
I think this is Trish. I guess if I had to give two pieces of advice, it's honesty, and it's also reaching out and being specific about what you need, whether that's honesty of saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. That's honesty of saying, I just can't cook dinner tonight. Or it's just honesty about fear. And I think the other thing is that I would encourage individuals to be able to find a platform that works for them to ask for help. We have something called, My Cancer Circle, which currently has over 39,000 active users. People are afraid to ask for specific help. But if you build a community, find a platform, invite friends, family, and coworkers, it's easy to just put out there, could somebody bring dinner on Friday night for 4 people? You're not calling up Susie or Johnny and putting them in an awkward spot. You're just putting it out there. It's also, I found for individuals that sometimes well-intended, caring people can be overwhelming. I can't deal with one more text, I've heard. I can't deal with the phone ringing 8 times a day and answering the same questions. So find mechanisms to communicate. Be honest. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be tired and overwhelmed. It's okay. You would feel comfortable saying the chemotherapy made me nauseous, right? Be that comfortable in saying that you're tired, you're afraid, or you're overwhelmed. That's my best advice.
Another question? Or Kelly, did you want to go ahead and tag onto that?
Just real quick, just giving everybody the opportunity to share their perspective, because we all do have different reactions to a cancer diagnosis. I saw a comment in the chat that, their relative wouldn't talk to them, but they were comfortable talking to another family member. So recognizing when people in your lives need help and support, but also acknowledging that you might not be the person for them at that time.
I'm going to just read one of the next questions I see. I'm sorry if this isn't the most in order, but it seems applicable to our conversation. Do you still have family members not understand your mental health, and you still have personal hurt that has come from what they've said or done? How do you overcome that?
This rings a little too true for me right now. And it's okay that they don't understand. It's okay that they don't get it. I always used to say this about cancer. A lot of my friends kind of ran for the hills when I was diagnosed and associated with the C word. They didn't really know how to handle me. They didn't know how to handle conversations with me. Like Kelly was saying, like, it was just this complete void that we didn't talk about. And I'm like, are we gonna talk about the bald head in the room? But I would say, just like cancer, it's okay that they don't get it. It's okay that, and I hope they never get it. I hope they never have to understand the dark thoughts and valleys and places that my mind sits. But very much so, like Kelly said, you just have to do your best to kind of explain your perspective and allow them to have their own, and set boundaries for yourself. Set those healthy boundaries for, in case somebody does want to have that conversation with you, and you're not in a place to have it, have the confidence and hold that space for yourself and just say, I'm looking forward to the time that I can talk to you about this, but right now is not it. It's not saying, screw you, blow off, don't talk to me about it. Like, you're never going to get an answer out of me. It's just saying right now is not the time, but I can't wait for when I'm strong enough and confident enough to sit here and chat about it with you. But I do, and I have had family members that are looking at me like, what do you mean you don't want to live anymore? What do you want? Like, you had cancer, like you fought to be, and I'm like, I know I fought to be here once before, and I'm fighting to be here again. And I wish I wasn't here. I don't wish this on the worst ex-boyfriend I've ever had. Like, but yeah, I guess just to echo what Kelly said, like, continue to have the conversations when you can, allow other people to have their perspectives on it, and let yourself have boundaries, because it's allowed.
All right. It is about 4 minutes to the hour, and I want to be respectful to everyone's transitions. So that seems like a nice place for us to press pause or put a bow on it, or however we want to, whatever metaphor we want to use. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Amanda, Kelly, and Tricia, for showing up today and not being shy, and for being vulnerable and real, on point, and for really just taking your heart and putting it through Zoom for all of us to get to experience. It's always so moving. Everyone's story is moving, and when people are able to share it like you all have, it just, we're all going to walk away different as a result. So thank you so much for that. Please, each of you, let me know when you publish your book, because I hear lots of books in your future. And yeah, so and thank you to to the audience members for attending. Your comments have just been so supportive and uplifting. It's like a psychological intervention right there. Just reading the chat, I feel better looking at so many of the things people have shared. And you're also being vulnerable with each other like that. I do have one quick plug that I forgot to give in the beginning that, if it's okay, I'd like to share now. If any of you is interested in continuing to hear other stories of mental health and resilience, our nonprofit True North Treks is hosting a free virtual documentary screening tonight, that if you go to the auditorium, you'll be able to see on the very bottom of the schedule a link to that webinar. It begins at 7 p.m. Central Time. That's Chicago time, not New York time. So 7 p.m. Central Time, and it's a 50-minute film that basically follows some amazing young adults with cancer as they enter the wilderness of their lives on our treks and share their stories. So to be continued.